there and welcome. My name is Linda and welcome to Linda Tea at Home. Really good to have your company today. Thank you so much for my regular viewers returning, as I hope you have. And if you are new or a new subscriber, a very warm welcome, and good to have you along with me today. So today's video, I thought I'd do this, hopefully this will go out on Friday. I thought I'd do the sort of reminiscing memories from my childhood type video that lots of people have done. I was like listening, because it's really interesting listening to people of your sort of contemporaries and what their childhoods were like. And well, I mean, there's so many similarities because life was just so different then, wasn't it? I mean, I'm imagining most of the people watching me today are probably of an age. Next week, in fact, this is the last week, I'll be 71, so I'll be 72 next week. And looking back over whether you might be 51, 61, 71, 81 or 91, you know, looking back over your life is just, I mean, I do it all the time. There's just every day there's something that I think about from my past, and I know it's all probably to do with losing people in your family because eventually we all go, don't we? But yeah, and it's nice to listen to other people's stories. So I'm hoping this won't rattle on forever. I'm just looking at the clock to see what time it is, because my videos, I know they're always too long. Thank you, by the way, for your response to the Christmas decoration sorting videos. Very much appreciated, and all your comments about that. So I was born in 1953, and 1953 was the year of the Queen's, the previous Queen, Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. So it was notable not only for me being born in that year, but the Queen becoming Queen, Princess Elizabeth becoming the Queen, if that makes more sense. We weren't here to see that, our family. We were still in Australia, where I was hatched, and my parents and my old sister all were Londoners, and we came back, a year, I think 3 years after that or something, and we settled in London to start with. Now, I don't know what to put in and what to leave out here. I've watched what other people talk about, and just got to put your own spin on these things, really, haven't you? One of the main things I remember, bizarrely, about my childhood is the fact that everybody smoked. My parents smoked. My sister and myself hated it, not because we were wise about any potential problems with it as time moved on, but we just didn't like it. We just hated it. And we both swore we would never smoke. I stuck to that. And sadly, my sister didn't manage it, but everyone did. It seemed to be a smoke-filled place, London, in so many ways. We used to have smogs, because that was people having, I'm sure lots of towns and cities in the UK did, but probably all over the world as well. But everybody had coal fires. The things that were burnt in the air from factories and whatever would have sent particles into the air, and that mixed with fog did no good to anybody at all. So it brought on these smogs where people would have thick masks over their face to go about their everyday business. Thousands of people died in, I think it was 1952 in London, because of this smog. Just a dreadful thing. Fortunately, a bit further down the line, I think sort of to late 50s, early 60s, it's a bit of a history lesson for you here, isn't it? They brought in like smokeless coal, and so things began to slowly improve. But and of course steam trains. Now, I gather the stuff that comes out of a steam train is steam. I don't know, but I mean, obviously they used to put coal into the burner to power the train. And I can remember standing in a station in London with my parents and watching a steam train come towards me. Obviously I was on the platform, and I can still see it now coming towards me with this head of steam coming out of the chimney thing at the top, and being quite intimidated by it. But yeah, people smoking, and London was smoking at the time with coal fires and whatnot. Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a It reminds you very much of the black and white films at the time. I think perhaps the London was a bit more black and white then, with all this sort of thing going on. I have actually written down some notes here, but they're in such a terrible order, just as I thought of things. So I'll be looking down at my book. So we came back to the UK, and we first of all moved to Paddington. My big memory of living in Paddington was falling over. I was running down the corridor. We lived in one of these. We lived in a place called Sussex Gardens, and they were, I don't know whether they were Edwardian or Victorian, blooming old buildings they were, and they were residential, and posh people used to live in them. But my parents, when we came back to this country, my mother used to do cleaning for the family that owned this house, so we were given the basement flat to live in. And I've got two memories of actually three memories of living there. I would have been three going up to four when I lived there, so I've got quite early memories about things. One was me running down the corridor, which was a stone floor or concrete or something, falling over, and as my mother put it, cutting my head open. So there's that memory. And also shelling peas we had a sort of living room, and this room had, I think, what you'd call French doors out onto a yard behind. Although we were in the basement, we did have some small outside space. And my parents were really quite keen on birds, as in as in canaries and budgies and that those sorts of birds with feathers. And we had I think it was a budgie, and he was called Digger. And and one day Mum and I was sitting in this room shelling peas into a colander. No frozen peas then, I'm afraid. And the bird somehow got out of his cage and flew out. Well, I'm imagining my mum must have let him out of the cage. He didn't have a jimmy and a key or anything, and he just disappeared off the window, and that was the last we ever saw of Digger. So they're my memories of living in that place. Then a bit later we moved to Camberwell, to a place near, I don't know if it's a part of Camberwell, but it's called Denmark Hill. And that's where I started to go to school. That was when I was just a rising five, so I was 4 when I started that. And I know we lived in a flat. My parents, because I don't know quite what this career choice was, but coming back from Australia after having lived there for 3 or 4 years, not that long really, they didn't have careers. My dad had been fighting in the Second World War. Mum was at home waiting for him to come back. They didn't have a career path. But Dad did a lot of driving back in the day, because he drove in the army. That was one of his jobs, driving people around and driving kind of those little tank things. I don't know what they're called. But before he did that, he worked, for some reason, he worked in a fish and chip shop, and we had a flat above it. And I can remember that it was on the corner of a road, and there was the window looking out over the view of what presumably was other shops, was kind of bow. It was a bow shape. There's this massive window. And I remember also paraffin heaters from there. And my dad having a chiropodist visit him, because he suffered with feet problems after marching and whatever in the Second World War. So yes, those are lovely memories. I do have other memories of that. One of them is when I went to school, not his feet. When I went to school, my sister and I both went to a local school, and we used to have, because children used to suffer with all sorts of things in the 50s. I mean, there was still rationing, I believe, food rationing, and a bit of a sort of leftovers from the war, no pun intended. We used to have, Mum used to have a big jar of malt, and every night she'd give us a teaspoonful of this malt, and oh, I can still taste it. It was the most horrendous thing, but you had to have it to sort of build yourself up. And also, I'm pretty sure that I'm right in saying we used to have cod liver oil at school. They used to give us something at school. I think it was cod liver oil, because as I say, children were so sort of, there was no decent diet around. We were basically living on whatever we could, I suppose, back then. So that was my memory of Camberwell. All lovely. In fact, I looked on YouTube the other day to see if my school, because I can remember the name of it, but I can't remember much more about it, apart from when I started school in the, I presume the sort of whatever the equivalent of reception is or was then, there were toilets, and I was a bit frightened of toilets because I'd been used to, in Australia, a toilet down the end of the garden, and it had lots of spiders in it, because that's the way they rolled in Brisbane in those days, in 1953, 1950, up to 1955, 6, whatever. And they had these school toilets, little kids' toilets, and one toilet had a from doing renovations, somebody had obviously dropped some sort of bit of a droplet of concrete or something, and it was stuck in the bottom of the pan, and it never flushed away. And why I remember that, I don't know. Anyway, moving on. After that, my parents moved to the suburbs, and we were again living above another fish and chip shop. And but this one was a fish and chip shop that had a restaurant, a fish restaurant on one of the floors. And Mum and Dad worked there with the owner, and we had the flat, so we were on like what would have been the 3rd floor, and this was in Borehamwood, which is also where all the Elstree studios are. I can remember living there. I can remember Sunday teas of salmon sandwiches, and Mum used to get her Sunday tea dining set out, and they were black teacups, white saucers with a black picture, a black sort of little picture of I'm sure it was a camel and a palm tree. And so I'm thinking about that now. I don't like drinking out of cups that are coloured now in today. I will always go for a cup that's got a white inside. And I wonder if it's to do with these black cups, because I kind of liked them because they were special Sunday cups. Oh, and she always used to try and get me to eat melon. And they'd say to me, my parents would say, like all of our parents would have said to us, well, you're lucky to have this. There's not many children get this, blah, 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 and make you feel bad about not liking anything. And to this day, I can't stand melon. I don't know. So thank you, Mum, who put me right off that. So yeah, we used to have Sunday tea. It would be salmon sandwiches, tinned salmon. I don't know if it's pink or red. And the tea set. I don't know if maybe my sister drank tea then. Perhaps we did. Did we drink tea as kids? There wasn't a lot of choice, really, was there? There was no, fizzy drinks or anything. Or probably, was there squash? It must have been squash. I do remember when Nesquik milkshake came out, and you could get chocolate or banana or strawberry, or I don't know which one came out first, but you could, so you put milk in a glass, because that's still available, isn't it? Well, until recently. I've not looked for it for ages, but yeah, so but anyway, the Sunday tea thing, I remember from that flat. And we had a car. When we lived there, we had a car, because I remember us being quite little, so I, effectively 4 or 5, we always had a TV. Once we'd moved to Borehamwood, we had a TV, and we had always had a car. And a TV then was only, I think it was just BBC, and then I think ITV is younger, I believe, and that came along, but not everybody could get. I think it was ITV. Don't think everyone could get that. I mean, I expect a lot of you might have similar memories to me. You could perhaps put me right on that, because all these memories, they're all my sorry about this light, by the way. They're all the memories that I've got. I don't know how factual they all are, but and another thing from that time, I can remember my mum always used to have, because she smoked, she would always have a bag of extra strong mints in her handbag. And in those days, you'd go into a sweet shop and you'd just buy a quarter of something. You wouldn't buy something pre-packed. Certainly not things like mints anyway. And I'm sure most of you remember doing that sort of thing. And her bag always smelt of a combination of cigarettes in the packet, so fresh cigarettes, and extra strong mints. And because she was my mum and I used to sit on her lap, and she'd cuddle me on her lap and I could smell this. That is to this day, I quite like that smell. I don't like the smell of cigarette smoke when someone's smoking one. Although, if somebody just lights a fresh cigarette, I don't mind that, but it's the whole, stale thing. I don't like that at all. As I say, I've never smoked, never wanted to. Never tried it, nothing. But yeah, so that was a kind of a comfort smell, and if I get that waft now, it takes me straight back to my mother. Anyway, so that was kind of the 50s. That takes us into the early 60s, and then from that flat, my parents, would you believe it, got their own fish and chip shop to run. I mean, honestly, that the embarrassment of having parents in, that ran a fish and chip shop, I can't tell you, or even worked in one, because when you go to secondary school and people say, oh yeah, it's just a bit embarrassing, really. But we moved to a different house within Borehamwood, which was a nice 3-bedroom house. So we lived there for a number of years, and those days, of course, were days when also I can remember the first school I went to, because I actually went to 2 infant schools, one junior school and one secondary school in that town. And the first infant school I went to when I was just 5, I can remember, because it wasn't very far from my mum and dad's shop in the sort of main road of Borehamwood. I'm saying the name of the place. I know you don't care what it was called, but just to make sense to me. I used to leave school and walk home on my own, and certainly when we moved to this other house and I went to a different infant school, always walked home on my own. If a friend lived near you, you might walk part of the way with them, but I lived further up in this particular direction than most of my school friends, so there was always the end bit to do on my own. And there was always a rumour, because there were quite some big detached houses on the road with lots of trees outside them, and it was said that one of the houses was haunted. So the fear of that, the house was called Windy Ridge, I remember that, and I think it was empty. It wasn't derelict, but it had been empty for years. It's as far as I can remember, and that was the scary house, and everyone said it was haunted, so I used to run past that every time I had to go past it, which was twice a day to and from school, and that lasted for quite a number of years. Yeah, the other memory of living in London, by the way, was trams and trolley buses. I do remember those, but I think they might have gone out of favour, not around the time we moved around. I'm not really sure about all the years on these things. I'm trying to remember this as accurately as possible. But then we'd moved to Borehamwood, and what have I got here? Oh yeah, and one of the things that I've just jotted all these notes down. One of the things that my parents were always said to me and my sister, if we wanted anything at all, it was they'd always say, well, we haven't got the money for that. We haven't got the money for that. And I mean, as far as I recall, there was money coming into that. They always worked. Mum used to have 2 or 3 jobs when she did cleaning, and they used to work together in this fish and chip shop as well. They always had money for cigarettes, and they weren't big drinkers from memory. They would at Christmas get the old cherry brandy out, or the rum. They both liked rum, dark rum and black. I think one liked rum and orange and one liked rum and blackcurrant. Ooh. And So yeah, but they weren't big on drinking, that as I remember. They always said didn't have enough money for this, and I suppose it was symptomatic of the time, wasn't it? Because children now, my kids used to go through the Argos catalogue before Christmas or before their birthday to sort of pick out 500 things that they wanted, and now of course it's children have got YouTube, they've got children's channels that do advertising, they've got every manner of Instagram. Mums get ideas from things, don't they? And they're absolutely deluged with stuff, and of course we weren't. And that's great, really. Anything I got was precious. And but I do remember that when it was my birthday, I'd write a list out. I always put a bike on my list, and I never ever got one because it was too expensive. But I'm sad about that, because I've never learned to ride a bike. So I blame my parents for that. We blame our parents for all sorts, don't we? But I always got nice things for birthday and Christmas, and there wasn't tons of stuff. But then I remember getting my Cindy doll. I got my Cindy doll. I loved her to bits, and I'd spend pocket money, because we had pocket money. I don't know, I don't remember having to do stuff to get pocket money. Maybe I did, but I was always good at keeping my bedroom tidy. I've always been quite tidy, because my mum was a little bit chaotic, really. I would not say she was a hoarder in any way, shape or form, but housework and that type of thing, they weren't really her bag, and very little of it was done. But I used to like a bit of order in my bedroom, so I used to be quite good at that. And it's just the way I am. And she would also, as they worked in a fish and chip shop, by then they'd owned one, but fish and chip shops always used to be shut on a Monday, and that was something to do with the fishermen not going out on Sundays, I suppose, and the supply chain thing. And so on Mondays she would be at home, and when I used to get home, I used to have my Cindy doll, and I used to have one or two other dolls that weren't Cindy's, but I never had a Barbie, but they were similar sorts of dolls. And I'd come home, and sometimes she'd sat all day and made little outfits for them, and she didn't make them very well. She wasn't into crafting or sewing. She didn't ever have a sewing machine. It was all a bit rough and ready, but that used to thrill me. I used to absolutely love that, to come, there's lots of things you remember about your parents that maybe, especially parents of my generation, who are quite strict, and they if you did something wrong, you'd get a smack for it, or a wait till your father gets home. And life was, I'm not trying to make out my life was harder than anybody else's, because it certainly wasn't. And we were okay as kids, and our parents were absolutely devoted to each other. They were far more devoted to each other than they were to me and my sister, which I suppose that's the way it should be, isn't it? Because your children you've only got for a certain length of time, and then they buzz off, don't they? And you're left with the person that you married. So that's the right way to do it. But they were good people, and they did their very best. But the whole, no, you can't have that because we can't afford it. Oh, did anyone get Look and Learn magazines? I remember my parents, I'm saying they weren't all bad, were they? I used to get it in the post every week, and I really used to look forward to Look and Learn. Sorry, get my teeth in. And I don't even remember what was in it, really. I'll have to give it a bit of a Google and see. But I used to get that. I think I might have got a comic as well, but I don't remember so much about that. And but I used to get a Look and Learn magazine every week, so that was good. Always look forward to that. Oh, and as a sort of a teenager, and you start getting interested in what sort of secondary school level now, getting interested in boys and pop stars and that. The Monkeys were my favourites when I was sort of my teen years, and you'd get books with Jackie magazine. Jackie, do you remember Jackie? I used to get that right up until I was about 17. No, I think I was probably about 18. And I used to have a problem page, and just, I don't know, suppose makeup tips. And girls would always write in and say, I don't know how to kiss a boy, and can you tell me? And this sort of stuff. It's quite amusing now. But and you get posters of the current pop stars. You put them on your bedroom wall, and also things like New Musical Express and Melody Maker. I used to love those. Always used to look up bits about the Monkeys and whoever else it was. I was a big Town and Motown, and still am. That's my favourite genre of music. And when I got a bit older, I had a record player in my bedroom, and I used to buy when I'd sort of got, because I had a Saturday job for a while, and two or three Saturday jobs actually. They weren't terribly successful because one was in a sort of a burger bar, and I'm not cut out for the public really. And where was it? Oh, Woolworths. I worked in Woolworths. Um, and used with that you'd buy records and things and play them on your little record player in your bedroom. And oh, that's another thing with Woolworths. I mean, when was living in Borehamwood, to start with, Woolworths all had individual counters, and I think I was on the stationery counter, something like that. But I do remember, and you probably remember too, if you live in the UK. I'm I don't know about people abroad, obviously, but there was you'd buy biscuits by the, I suppose, the pound or half pound, and they'd all be loose in this sort of um, glass container round the edge of a counter. I can't really describe it. And someone would serve you with the amount of biscuits, the weight of biscuits you want, and then you could also buy broken biscuits for a cheaper price. And so we had a Sainsbury's in our town as well, but it was the original type of Sainsbury's, where it's a big shop and you go in the front door, obviously, and you've got like a horseshoe of counters all round the edge, and you would be served by someone behind the counter. I'm imagining it was probably fish and meat, um, and stuff. I don't know if they sold like provisions, other sorts of things like tins of stuff. I can't remember the detail, but I do remember the shop and going into the shop, until of course they all shut those, and they all turned into like the big supermarkets, didn't they? Well, they started off as small supermarkets, but they got bigger. And we also had a Tesco came to our town, but Tesco was the shop that, it was a bit sort of ghetto, it wasn't. I don't know where we would have got. What were the shop, the other? I'm trying to think of the supermarkets that we had at the time. There's a name buzzing around in my head, but I can't quite catch it. But let me just check. Thinking of Fine Fare, but there was Mac Fisheries. That was obviously a fish, a fish shop. Yeah, Fine Fare was a supermarket. Oh, there were a few. Their names escape me, but of course now we know we've got all the, a fairly small amount. Yeah, there were quite a few different. They were all quite small compared to what you get now. None of these sort of what you call them, mega supermarkets or whatever they're called. What else have I got here? That's coming up to Woolworths. We did for a spell have one of my grandparents living with us. So my father's mother, who I'd only got one grandparent left by then. This was when I was, I don't know, about 12 or something. She kept she'd been widowed, and she lived in a place she lived in Paddington, actually, in London, in a basement flat, not the one we were in, but and she had to leave there because she was too old. The job she had, she was still working, and she must have been her late 70s then. And I'll tell you the job she used to do. She obviously lived in a place which, the kind of place we'd lived in when we first came back, so a big old house where quite posh people lived, but the staff obviously lived in the basement, and it's a bit like upstairs downstairs, this, isn't it? And her and my grandfather, who I'd never met, I met him once while he lived there. And then he died after that, not because of anything to do with me, but my father hated him. That's why I'd never seen him before. Their job used to be to keep the boilers stoked and going, to heat the water and whatever in the house above. So she obviously got too old. Sorry about my fringe. She obviously got too old to do that at some point, and she didn't have anywhere to go. So she came and lived with us, and so my sister and I had to share a bedroom again because by then we'd got our own room. And but that didn't really work out very well. It's grandparent and grandchild relationships. I'm not saying that they were all dreadful in those days, because there are lots of people of my age and older than me say they had a wonderful relationship with their grandparents, but mine were I didn't really. My mother's parents, who I had met far more, but only really for a few years, because I think my mother's mother died in 1959, so I would have been 6, and I think my granddad probably lasted another 10 years. And anyway, so I did know him, but granddads didn't do much with children, I don't think, in those days. It tended to be nanas more than granddads. And this particular nanny, we used to call them both nanny, this nanny that was left, she just wasn't very child minded. And if me and my sister had an argument, which happened all the time because my sister absolutely hated me with a vengeance, I can't imagine why, she would sort of tell our parents, and you felt like she was sort of, I mean, I suppose that's what people did then. But and I suppose that, if I don't really have to tell my children that their children have done something terrible. I might tell them if they've been upset about something or if something bad's happened, but you don't normally snitch, do you? And if you do it in a sort of constructive way these days, don't you? And I've got a decent relationship with all my grandchildren, and some, as you know, they come here quite a lot. But it was different then. And anyway, eventually she decided, and her mobility was quite bad. She was a very big woman. She was kind of hunched, but she was very big. And this is how I've always thought I've kind of, in that way, taken after her, because that I as you know, if you've seen me before, I got quite big, and I had been even bigger than that. And yeah, I think you used to think, this is kind of written in my DNA. But yeah, so eventually we had to move again within the same town. But I can't remember why we. Oh yeah, because my parents stopped working in this particular. The one that they owned, they decided to sell it because they got fed up with it and they wanted to do different sorts of work. So we moved to another house in the town, which was smaller, and there was nowhere for her to go. And so she went to an old people's home, but it was literally at the end of our road. So we could pop in and see her whenever we liked. But yeah, there was no kind of real affection. I mean, when she died, I was quite sad, but because well, you do get sad, don't you? But yeah, it wasn't a particularly warm, fuzzy relationship anyway. Um, the I'm watching the time. I think I must have been on here half an hour already. Just a few sort of. I might carry on this in a second video if you're that interested. Let me know, because I've written loads of stuff down here. I was going to mention a few key things that had happened. I mentioned the coronation in 1953 at the beginning, and the 1960s when I was at junior and then going into secondary school. The things that I remember as sort of bullet points really for that decade was, I remember the assassin. I know we all remember the assassination of JFK because it's been highly reported. I don't remember seeing on the news about it, but I do remember watching the funeral, and of course that little boy of his doing the salute. And I know that's been replayed on TV a million times since, because it's so sad. Just a sad family, really, wasn't it, in the end? But I'm pretty sure I remember actually watching that. My parents had it on. I remember watching Winston Churchill's funeral, and I always remember that was 1965. I think JFK was he 63? The Churchill died in 65, and I remember watching that, and he went on a boat, didn't he, onto the Thames, and was taken down to, I'm not sure where he's buried, but somewhere along the Thames. I remember watching the World Cup. My current husband doesn't. He was only what was he? He was 4, so he probably didn't. He probably didn't watch it. And I was 13, so is that right? 16. Yeah, he was 4 and I was 13. So I do remember watching that with my dad. So got one over on him on that one. The only time England's won a World Cup, and I saw it and he hasn't. So far, anyway, we live in hopes. Apart from the England ladies, of course, I don't know. Did they win? What did they win recently? Was that the World Cup or was that the Euros? No, they won the Euro. Anyway, shut up, Linda. And the moon landings. And I remember watching a lot of because I've always been interested in space and whatever. But I remember watching all the build up to it, or as much as we could in those days with the black and white TV and whatnot. But I keep saying whatnot, don't I? And then getting up the next morning and it had kind of happened. Neil Armstrong had said, small step for man, blah blah blah. But I thought, well, why didn't I see the actual him stepping out? I mean, of course, we've seen it 100 times since, haven't we? Because it's quite often put on TV for all different reasons. But I checked, and actually in the UK, it was just before 4 o'clock in the morning. And although I get up or I wake up around that time now, when I was 13, I definitely wasn't waking up at 4 in the morning. So that's why I didn't see it live. But I do remember it. And of course, who doesn't? And then getting older and, leaving school, getting jobs and going into a job where I met the first man I married. And the sort of social life we had. It was really great in those days because people, nobody worried about you quite so much as they do now. As younger children, we'd go off and play. I think I touched on this earlier, and I think I missed the point. But yeah, we used to go out and play, and our parents, as long as we were home for dinner, they didn't fuss about where we were. And of course, that's completely different now. And we still had people murdering children in those days, didn't we? We had the Moors murderers, and any number of children that went they weren't sort of fall off the street one after the other, but there was always stuff in the press about it. So that's not actually changed. It's just that we know more about it and we're more aware. But yeah, we used to when I was with him, we used to go out. I lived at home with my parents. Obviously, he did. I think he was 18 and I was 19 when we started going out. Or no, he was 17 and I was 18, something like that. Anyway, and yeah, we'd go to pubs. The drinking and driving thing really wasn't too much of a thing. I know. Don't. I know what you're thinking. I don't do it now. I definitely don't do it now. But I've done it for years. Let's just be clear on that. But back in those, when we were driving and people didn't, you were sort of in control of it. Not in control. You just used your own common sense then, but of course now it's and rightly so, it's a different story. So if you thought you could see in a straight line, you got in the car and you drove home. So we didn't have seat belts sold. We didn't. The seat belts were bought in a bit after that, and then you didn't have seat belts in the back of the car because I think at first they thought you didn't need them, didn't they? So we used to go out to the pub in the evening, and then after that the pub had closed, we'd go for either a KFC, because I think they were they were called Kentucky Fried Chickens then, and I think they were one of the first sort of takeaway type things. I'm perhaps McDonald's is older. I'm not sure. I think KFC might be older. And we'd go for a curry, or we'd go for a Greek, or we'd go for a Chinese. I mean, can you imagine now? Well, if you're older like me, can you imagine going out and having, numerous drinks in a pub and then driving somewhere to a restaurant and somebody letting you in for a start at 11 o'clock or 11:30 at night? But we did. And when me and my first husband decided to get married, well, I think I decided and he just went on with it. We lived at home with our parents, as I say, till the day we got married. And then you go to your marital home, which we'd bought a flat. Now, we were able to buy a flat because we were able to save. It was easy. It was what a lot of people, it's kind of gone full circle now, because kids are or young people are staying at home with their parents to save up because there's absolutely no way they can afford to move out and go do a flat share or whatever, and also save if they want to have a mortgage. It's absolutely out of the question. I mean, I don't know what property prices are around the world, but they are very, very high in the UK, and land is very scarce for building. And we're all stuffed really, aren't we? So but that was so, and when we were married we didn't have children straight away. I'd never even gave that a thought. Well, neither of us did. And so we still carried on going out and, you know, seeing our friends. We used to have parties. Yeah, it used to be great, and people used to bring records to parties as well, didn't they? Party sevens. Do you remember the party sevens? Those massive, great barrel things that looked a bit like a can of beer, but they were obviously 7 pints. And you'd have one of those openers that had a metal V on the end, and you used to sort of press it in, and you had to press it in the other side as well. It's the same for cans of any other sort of drink as well, because by then we've got, you know, cans of lemonade, Coke, Pepsi, whatever, Fanta, all these things. And not the ring pull thing that you get now. It was a bit of an effort to open something, and if you couldn't find the pressy thing, you know, the opener, the can opener, you'd have somebody go and find a screwdriver or something and bash it in with a hammer, because you had to have both sides of the can open. So Watney's party seven, I think that was. I think it was Watney's. And then you take horrible cheap plonk, wouldn't you? Or yeah, because I think wine, as in wine, that is. In case you're not familiar with the term, and it was probably about £2 a bottle or something in those days, which of course isn't the same as £2 a bottle now, but it was still cheap stuff, and it was horrible. You could take your nail varnish off with it, but you know, it got you in the party spirit. And you take, did I finish that sentence? You take LPs and records, because people didn't have, well, some people had good record collections, but if you didn't like their taste in music, you'd write your name on the bit of paper in the middle, wouldn't you, where the label in the middle where the artist's name was. You'd write Linda or whatever, and well, if your name's Linda. And yes, and then you'd probably leave it there. But yeah, really, really kind of not. And when we decided to have our first child, and she was born, we'd been married just, well, 3 years and 9 months after we got married. So we had a little bit of time just to spend together and have some fun. And then your children come along and it takes it all away, doesn't it? You don't go out for 15 years, do you? No, I've got lovely children. I'm not complaining about them. So we're on to the last page. So what have I got here? Yeah, so up to the 1980s, having my babies. I mean, I think I'll probably just leave it there, because this has gone on for ages and I could rattle on about this stuff. I don't know whether you found any of this interesting. I hope there's some stuff you've got in common. If you live in other countries, Australia, US, wherever you might live, if your experience of being a child was wildly different to what mine was, and I think my childhood was fairly typical of the day. Yeah, just let me know. It'd be interesting to know how things work. Yeah, I'm just having a quick look without trying to not look too obvious looking at my pad. I think I've covered most of it. I hope you found this interesting. I'm going to do something different next time. If you are one of my new subscribers, please don't unsubscribe. Thank you so much for subscribing. I really do appreciate it. And even if you're just watching me for the first time and haven't subscribed, I really appreciate that as well. But yeah, I'm still over my 2,000, so I'm still pleased about that, and I'm expecting my numbers to go, because they always do. But you know, we try, don't we? We try. But yeah, I do different sorts of things on my channel. I chat about things a lot. You know, I like to hear from you. With your comments and your suggestions. I do some clothing, or do just all sorts of different things. Yeah, next time I've got a couple of ideas. I keep meaning to show you my pots as well. I've done a couple of pots for my garden, but I won't do that today, because I think I've been on here long enough. So I might do something before next Friday, or I might see you again next Friday. But thank you so much for watching me. Thank you for being there for me, and I will see you very soon. Have a, what, we're Friday now. No, we're Thursday now. We're Thursday now. Thursday now. So have a great weekend. You'll see me on Friday tomorrow, and yeah, take care. Bye for now.